So I'm going to talk about where I'm at with Mycroft right now. So basically, I haven't really had much of a chance to work on Mycroft, but I do have something that's really cool. So I'm going to talk about some mistakes I had with the skill creation skill. So if you didn't see the last video, which honestly you're not really missing out on much, since I'll try to cover all that stuff in this video. But in the last video, casual video 7.2, that ended up being 13 and a half hours long, I created a skill that helps me create other skills quickly. And I just want to demonstrate some mistakes that I made, because if you watch that video, you know that I tried running it and it did run successfully, even 13 and a half hours later. So I want to show some mistakes I made in that skill. Actually, it probably wouldn't hurt to demonstrate that skill first before I go over the mistakes, then it'll make a lot more sense. So basically, Mycroft, in case you didn't know, that allows you to, it's a custom voice assistant. You can either buy a device that runs Mycroft, or you can run it on pretty much any Linux system as long as it has a supported microphone. The microphone that I'm using is the Logitech C270, and I'm running this on my Raspberry Pi 4. There is a Mycroft distribution, which is basically Raspbian with some stuff stripped out and Mycroft all set up. But I decided to just run it on raw Raspbian 4 or Raspberry Pi OS because I want to be able to do other things besides Mycroft. So that's exactly what I did. So you can basically program it to do whatever you want, create your own commands and program it to do what you want. You can do stuff with the Philips Hue, which I still haven't figured out since the last video. But you can do a lot of other things too. So it can execute Python code, and that provides tons of possibilities, including running the command line. So let's go to the Raspberry Pi now. So on the Raspberry Pi, which, there we go. Couldn't see the cursor right away. So Mycroft is actually running right now. So you could probably find some steps for this online of how to install Mycroft. Actually, I showcased this in my last video. I basically downloaded it from GitHub and ran the setup and stuff like that. But my Mycroft is actually stored in a folder called Mycroft Core. Once you've extracted everything, you should see files like this. And once you have a proper microphone connected, which you can verify by going into Audacity, this is a non-telemetry version of Audacity. The latest version that you can get with apt is a non-telemetry version, so don't worry about the telemetry stuff, because Linux would not make that the latest version, the one with telemetry. So yeah, my microphone is not showing up because it's actually being used by Mycroft right now. So there's a start Mycroft script when you install it. If you follow my last video, casual video 7, just do start Mycroft all. And I think I could pull up the CLI right now. That might cause it to glitch out. So you can see the microphone level and stuff. Everything should be working properly. I'm going to close out of that because it's still running in the background. And when you want to create a skill, you just go in the bin folder, Mycroft MSK create, and then it'll help you create a skill basically. But I have a skill that helps me create other skills. And what it does is it pulls up a notepad window on my Windows computer over SSH, And then I can enter information like what is the name of the skill, a description, what does it actually do, what's the category. I can automate all that. I basically just have a text file come up asking me what I want to do. I could probably demonstrate it real quick, even though I'm not going to fully use it right now. So all my Mycroft stuff is stored in the Documents Mycroft folder. I have a skill called Create Skill .sh, and what it actually does is it connects to my computer and it pulled up a Notepad document by running a Python script which creates the Notepad file with all the questions in it. Then it uses SCP to send that file to the root of my D drive, which I have set up with WSL in Windows. That's how I make an SSH connection. I just use WSL, which is a way you can sort of run Linux within Windows to some extent. And you can set up SSH on that thing, which is how I actually connect to it. And I was running Ansible right here, but this is actually out of date because that's not what I do now. This is actually an out-of-date script. Let's look at my create skill Nook file. That one's more up to date. So, yeah, it runs that create input file. And then what it does is it runs SCP and then sends it to my Intel Nook. And then this last line right here essentially just runs it. It just runs that Notepad file in Notepad, and this is a command I use on the terminal to run that in WSL. WSL connects to the Windows command line, which then runs Notepad with the file that it just sent over. So that's essentially how it works. So this IP address is actually out of date right now. This IP address needs to get changed to, I think it was 192.168.1.27, if I remember correctly. And I'm doing this on port 2022 because that's how I have WSL configured. I'm going to set up a WSL on my main system, so I'll show you how all that works in a bit, I think. And also, I think the IP address needs to get changed here, so let's copy that and then paste it. So now that's updated as well. So basically I have a Mycroft skill, and I'll show you what the actual skill looks like. So none of this probably makes sense. I apologize about how disjointed I am with this. I did show this in the last video. This is a skill to help me create other skills because the process can be quite tedious. I can tell that it was just triggered because I said the word. Anyway, create skill. Create skill Windows. So what that Mycroft MSK does that I previously showed on here is it creates all these different files. And basically all this particular skill does is it imports OS so I could run a command line command using os.system. And it runs that create skill, which is not what I want. I want to change that to the Nook script. So I have a .sh script because it runs bash. It does what I want. And I just realized, since I have Mycroft running and I just modified his skill, I may have to reboot Mycroft. So one of the other problems we had in the previous video was launching Mycroft. Like the first time I launch it, doesn't work correctly. And then when I restart all the services, then it does work. So the way I properly launch Mycroft is I'll actually stop it right now. So I'm just going to run the stop Mycroft, which basically kills all the services. And I've actually created a script in my documents folder on here called launch Mycroft. And essentially it runs that start Mycroft script. And then I have it wait a minute, and then I have it restart everything. And that works. If I were to run it at startup, then Mycroft would start right away without any intervention, completely headless, which is great because I've been using it headlessly for a while, and I'll show you how I was using it. So to launch it, I'm going to do it this way. So it launched it manually. It'll wait a minute, then reboot it. So while we're waiting for that, I made the change to the skill. And essentially what the skill creator actually does, that's another skill. So I have one skill to basically ask for all the prompts, like what's the name of the skill, what does it do? Then I have another skill that actually takes a file from the computer back into the Raspberry Pi, and then it goes ahead and creates the skill. And the way it actually creates a skill is the use information script, which just runs a use information thing, I think. Oops. I want to go into this file. So it just runs the use skill, and I should probably change that to use skill and nuck, which means I should maybe reboot this again. I'm just gonna restart it now that I updated that skill. I haven't figured out the best way to restart when I added individual skill. I'll just restart the skills service. When I restart the skills service, it tends to break other stuff as far as I can remember. And as far as the firewall goes, I just use UFW. So like right now, if I run UFW, which is for the firewall, then what I want to do is, so firewall is relevant because of this right here. When I'm on a public network, I may want to block incoming connections to that port. I can allow outgoing connections because it's what the Pi itself does. But when it comes to incoming connections, just to make sure that nothing on the public network tries to do any incoming connections on port 8181, I deny incoming connections, but I allow outgoing connections. And I forget exactly what the command is. Yeah, so UFW allow in for incoming connections for 5900, which is BNC. And then allow out is how you allow outgoing connections. So typically you're either going to block incoming connections and outgoing connections for a given port, or you're going to allow one and block one, and vice versa. Or you're going to allow everything, or you're going to deny everything. So if you wanted to deny everything related to port 22, then you would do sudo UFW deny 22. But let's say you wanted to allow outgoing connections for 22, but deny incoming connections. Well, then you would allow 22 and then deny in 22. Those are the UFW commands you would run if you're doing those specific things. So I didn't really have firewall figured out before, but that's essentially how you do it. So what I'm doing is basically deny. So I would have ran sudo UFW deny in 8181. And then probably allow out 8181. That's how you do the firewall stuff pertaining to this if you're concerned about it. Sorry, I rambled on that more than I should have, but that's essentially how it's done. So let's see, it restarted now. Oh yeah, I was going to show the creation skill, which I think I'm probably creating more confusion than good by doing this. So use skill Windows. Use skill Nook is what I want. Yeah, use skill Nook. What that does is it does a message box saying hello world just so I can see if the script is working. It automatically closes itself after 2 seconds on the Windows computer. And then it sends the file from the computer to the Pi. And then it runs Python 3. It basically just figures out, I forget exactly what that does actually, but I have it in that previous video. Calculate lines, I think that just figures out where things are. Then it runs the create expect. So when it creates a new skill, there's a bunch of prompts, and creating an expect script allows you to automate answering those prompts. So the way you automate prompts in Bash, whenever a prompt comes up and you want to automate it, then you create an expect script. That's one of the ways to do it. So it basically runs through everything. Then it gets the skill name so that we know the directory of the newly created skill. And then I basically copy the manifest file, which has import OS and those types of things in it, to the correct location. It basically just parses out or it retrieves the line that has a full path in it, I think. And I forget exactly what this does. And then it actually restarts the skills service, which I think actually does update it properly now that I think about it. So that's basically just for my skill creator, which I did in the last video. Nothing really new about that. So if I want to create a skill, which I think I could demonstrate it real quick, and then I'll probably end up deleting it afterwards. So if we come over to here, then I should be able to say, hey Mycroft, help me create a skill in Windows. Yeah, and if it's working correctly, then this notepad document automatically comes up, and I don't know why that font is so small, but I can specify the name of the skill that I want to create. I'll just create an echo skill, which is completely useless, but at least I can demonstrate the process. Call it something like echo stuff. Like the echo command, that it'll just use that in some way. What are some phrases that I want to use to trigger that? Echo, hi there. I'm just gonna hard code stuff. And if you want to combine intents together, by the way, this is the syntax you use. So this line is irrelevant now. That's the way you would do it. So I could say echo hi there or echo hey there. That's my command that I use. And then I don't care about the responses because I don't use the auditory feedback. I don't think it's necessary since I have directly observable results for this type of stuff. I'll just say doing that. That's what it'll respond with. What is a one-line description? Echoes, hi there. I don't care how it does that. And then what command do I want to run with the os.system? I forget exactly how I actually formatted this. I think I just say os.system, or else I don't need to include that. Something like that. That's the actual command on the command line. So now I have all the information needed to create this skill. So then I could just say, what's the trigger phrase for utilizing a skill now? I forgot what the trigger phrase is, so I'm just gonna check in Mycroft skills, use information Windows skill. My trigger phrase is, I think, in locale enus. Then I want to do a .intent file. I finished my Windows skill. That's what the phrase is once I got the skill completed. So now back in Windows, I just have to say, hey Mycroft, I finished my Windows skill. That actually didn't work because of some mistakes that I think I may have made. The IP address is different, that's what it is. Let's go into the... I think we have to modify the skill to reflect the correct IP address. So, yeah. Let's do a global replace with that public IP address with my private only IP address. Anyway, so I think that's all I need to change. I did get host-based authentication enabled too, which I also want to demonstrate in this video. But, oh, I modified it, didn't I? Which means I now need to restart. I don't think it's just going to work. And by the way, there are sounds that are made when I use a voice command. So, let's see if it works right out of the gate. Hey Mycroft, I finished my Windows skill. I just saw a hello world. So that noise you heard is a weird noise that it makes, but you heard when it heard the trigger phrase. So what it's doing now is it grabbed the file and then it created the skill using the expect script, which I never demonstrated yet. So the expect script looks like this. So I'm not going to demonstrate everything that this does because I did show it in that other video. But this is creating an array of all the lines that exist in the file, which is hard-coded, but it's going to be the same all the time. And essentially, it opens up that new skill prompt, that text file that's involved. It converts that into an array, closes that file out. Then it runs the skill creator, and then it expects all the prompts that come up normally. And it basically reads the correct line from that file that we were just in, that text file. It reads the correct line from that text file right there. And it basically does that with all the different prompts. This is probably not the most efficient way to do it, but it works, so I'm not touching it anymore. And that's how I create a skill in Mycroft. So now, that skill that I just created, I should be able to go to Mycroft skills and see what I just... Yeah, it created the new skill automatically. I didn't do anything. because I created a skill creator. So if I look in, that echoes, or that, yeah, that skill right there. Then I go into the manifest file. This is the correct manifest file, so that worked correctly. It's got the OS on there. I automated that. Then if I look at the init.py, it did everything correctly. And if I have more than one command that I want to run, more than one os.system, which it took directly from that file we created in Windows, then they'll all show up here. So very cool. We just created a useless skill in a matter of minutes. Very cool. So I automated my skill creation process, which is pretty cool. So let's see. Now that you know what my skill creator is with my absolutely convoluted explanation, I'm gonna try to make things less convoluted from here on out if I can, which is very difficult to do. But I want to show some mistakes that I made now and why that what I just demonstrated wasn't working in the previous video. So let's come back into the previous folder that we were in. And one of the mistakes I made was I actually had the wrong path in the file. Let's actually go back to where we just were. I think this is where I want to be. Yeah. So one of the reasons it didn't work is because this path I had for executing the script was just wrong. I think I forgot the Mycroft right here from the last video, which is why it wasn't working. So that was one mistake I previously made. It heard my trigger phrase just now, and once again, I have it muted for you now. So that was one of my mistakes. Another mistake I made was, come on, in my expect script, one of my paths was relative rather than absolute. One of the important things with running the Python script with the Mycroft skills, the paths have to be absolute, because while it might work relative right here when you manually test it, the path that it executes from when you actually do the word that shall not be named, because it'll trigger it, that is executed from a different environment, so the path has to be absolute for it to reference correctly. I didn't have an absolute path in here, so that's one reason this was failing. And then now I'm going to demonstrate my most useful skill that I've created so far. And it's very adaptable too, by the way. But this is a skill that allows me to open whatever I want on the computer pretty much. So I'll do a quick demonstration. Hey Mycroft, open YouTube. So it just pulled up YouTube. Pretty useful, huh? So I didn't create a skill to specifically open up YouTube. It's actually a universal skill that can open up anything. So it's just an open script, really, but I can open whatever I want. So, for example, if I want to open Watch Later, hey Mycroft, open Watch Later. I use the same skill to open up that. I didn't create two separate skills for that, by the way. And I can open up pretty much whatever YouTube I want, whatever channel I want, because I programmed it to do any of them. So, for example, if I wanted to open up the Primogen, hey Mycroft, open Vim God. That's my trigger phrase for that because I might not know the word primogen. This is all from the same exact skill. And if I want to create something new to open up, I can do it in like 10 seconds. It only takes 10 seconds to add new things to open. So that's pretty useful. It's one skill that can do all of it. I can open up specific files on here too. So let's see, what's a file that I could actually use right now? I'll just open up a song that I have. Hey Mycroft, open CyberDice. So there we go. I could hear it right now, but I think I have it muted for you. So that song opened up successfully. That's a song that I have on the system, and I programmed it to do that. So I can open up whatever I want, basically. So if I want to, you get the idea. I can open up pretty much any URL or file or program on the computer. Hey Mycroft, open Ducto. That recognized it wrong. It actually uses a mechanism which I'll show you later on where the voice recognition won't be 100% accurate, so I have it do the closest thing to what it recognized. So no matter what, it'll open something up, even if I say some random word. Like, hey Mycroft, open supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Wonder what that'll open up. Oh my gosh. I think I actually set it to open up that playlist right there. And I guess that was the closest thing to Supercala, blah, blah, blah. This was the closest thing to whatever the trigger phrase was. So, yeah, I can say random words and open up random things essentially because it matches whatever's the closest to what I said. So, yeah, I could open up whatever URL or file that I want, basically. I think I showed enough of that, so why don't I show you how I did it for once? Something you've all been waiting for. How did I do this? So it's actually not too difficult. So the skill to open up files, I actually have a text file that stores all the things that I can open up. So basically the file is formatted as such. These are the trigger phrases. So open and then whatever I want to open. And then the actual destination, whether it's a path on the computer or a URL, is what's second. So the trigger phrase, destination, very simple. So this opens up the J drive, right? Even though there's no such thing. So like obviously this says letter C, which means that the command is, hey Mycroft, open letter C. There we go. So that first line that you saw in the file is what actually made that happen. Oops. So, this is supposed to be letter F, but it recognizes F wrong. So I just call it fix because I think it was the sixth thing I had at one point. It's a sixth letter and it starts with an F. And rhymes with 6 as well. So letter fix really means the F drive. So if it recognizes something wrong, I'll adjust it accordingly. So ducto spelled D-U-K-T-O, for example, but it sounds like ducto, which will recognize it better. So I just do whatever corresponds with that. So if I want to open up Seinfeld, for example, on Netflix, I just have it on Brave, not Google Chrome. I have it basically go to the URL for searching Seinfeld. So that's how I have it do that, for example. And then music files, I just specify the path to the music file. And a backslash actually needs quadruple backslashes right now because just how I have it programmed. Because backslash means escaping a character. So I have to escape a backslash, but I think I have to do it twice because of just how the string is formatted in the actual programming. It was the way I could make it work right now. That's something I'm hoping to change someday so you don't need so many backslashes right there. But it doesn't matter because if I'm adding anything, I usually duplicate something that I already have here and adjust it accordingly. So if I want to add a new song to open up, like a song called smooth.mid, all I have to do to add that capability is duplicate that line, delete that. Using Vim, it's pretty quick, so I could just say smooth, which is the name of the song. Then I just have to go to here and change that to smooth.mid. That's the path of the file. And then I just save it out, and just like that, the command already exists. So in theory, I should be able to do that now. I might already have a command for that, to be honest, so I might have created a duplicate one, but that's just an example. Hey, Mycroft, open smooth. It worked. I actually had the case sensitivity wrong, but it otherwise worked, which is pretty cool. So, you saw me program that. That technically only takes like 10 seconds if I don't explain it. And I don't even have to refresh the skill because it just uses a skill that reads that file we were just in. Very efficient and adaptable. I have over 200 things in that file, and I pretty much showed everything you need to know. So if I'm opening something in Brave, whoops, I gotta go into the Mycroft folder. So if I'm doing something in Brave, for example, then, so if I want to open up the Office, I basically just have it execute Brave. I tell it the path on the actual computer because of how I have it programmed. Using brave.exe, open up that link, right? And then if I want to use Chrome instead, then I do the path to Chrome. It's very adaptable. If I open up my email, for example, I want to use Chrome instead of Brave. So I just do that accordingly. If I want to open up a folder, then I use the path for explorer.exe. And if I'm doing a file that has a proper default program that it opens up with, I just have to do the file itself. I don't have to open it through anything. That's pretty much all there is to it. So I could do virtually anything that I want to open. A YouTube channel, which I hard coded in here based on a URL. My watch later, which is also a URL. Watch history is another one. I mean, I got like 200 things here. Oh, maybe not quite 200, but not too far off, honestly. There's a potential for that. Wouldn't take very long to do that. So, yeah. That's honestly all there is to how that works. So I'll show you the actual coding now. So the skill, I think, is... What's the skill? I think it's this skill right here. So if I were to look at the init.py, the way it actually works is I'm using OS, of course, for the command. And this library allows me to do the closest match to the command. So I create global variables for commands and locations so it could be accessed anywhere in the script essentially. So basically you saw how the file was comma separated. So within the first one is the label, and the second one's the actual destination, if you will. So the trigger phrase is basically just storing a list of all the trigger phrases. So line one's trigger phrase, then two, then three, and four, and so on. Then all the locations. It stores it in two parallel lists. Then I can match the index accordingly. So it reads that file that I showed you, which you can actually chain everything together in one if you want to. It goes through that file, and since lines are comma separated, I can create an array called line, which is just temporary. Line index 0 will be the command that I'm doing. Line index 1 will be the location, so I just append those accordingly. And then I retrieve the actual thing that I said, which is called an utterance. So like open smooth, that's an utterance. Actually, I'll do a longer example. I'll do like open the primogen. No, that's still one word. Open duck toe. That's two words. So open duck toe. Those are three words in my utterance. And what it actually does then is, this is how you retrieve an utterance. I think you can create indexes and retrieve specific things, but I haven't figured out how to do that. Since my command always starts with the word open, I can just parse that out easily. I also use the word play, and that works the same way as open. So if I want to play a song, I can say play instead of open, but that's just for my own sake. There's no reason to do both of them technically, but why not? Have support for that. So this actually retrieves my utterance right there. And this parses out, it finds the first space in the utterance, which is the first word. It basically ignores that space as well, so the result becomes itself, but with the first word parsed out. That's what that line does. And then this actually gets, I forget what that actually does. It creates a sequence matcher, which is needed to match things, I think. And then this was for debugging purposes so that I could see what the actual variable came out as. I just ran echo result, and then when I was using the CLI of Mycroft, I could see what that was for troubleshooting. Because I made so many mistakes when creating this code. This is before the chatbot came to the public, so I was on my own with this. Although I would have liked the chatbot's help because it might have been done quicker. But this was an interesting experience making this, though. So that it gets some match by, this is the algorithm that's used for matching it. Forget exactly how it works. It passes something through a lambda function, and then it just does the closest match, which is either going to be the command itself if there's like 100% match, or else whatever we match here will be the closest thing. And then I figure out the index based on what this match was. It actually matches against everything that exists in the commands. It just matches the closest thing. That's actually what this does, I think. It just matches the closest thing to what actually exists. So match is always going to be something that exists. So if it recognizes something slightly wrong, that doesn't exist, right? So it'll just match to the closest thing. Like that supercalifragilistic word. it does the closest thing to that, which apparently was not Dr. Mike, that DaVinci Resolve playlist. Figured out the index of what the exact match is once we've ran through that algorithm and figured it out exactly. Then it runs using this syntax what I want to run. This is the syntax of what it does. So locations right here, using this quote syntax right here, is essentially how it runs. So that's all the OpenScript really is. It reads from that text file all the commands I have in there, which you saw how quickly I created that smooth one. Very smooth, wasn't it? Kind of ironic to the name, but yeah, that takes like 10-15 seconds in some situations, and I don't even have to restart Mycroft or anything. It's very efficient, let's just put it that way. So that is my most useful skill so far. That's all I've really done so far, but it's honestly so useful for pulling up stuff. So if I'm currently watching a video, I can create temporary commands too in a matter of seconds to pull up a specific video that I may be in the middle of watching. So pretty much all there is to that. So now that I've demonstrated that script, why don't I show you how to authenticate SSH properly. So I'll actually show you the steps. I can't think of the steps off the top of my head, to be perfectly honest. I was going to memorize them before this video, but if I'm being honest, I completely forgot to do that. We'll have to trust that I happen to remember, which I don't. But to do host-based authentication, there's essentially two different ways you can do it. And that depends on whether you still have password-based authentication enabled or not. You know what? I'm going to figure it out ahead of time, and I'll be right back. Right, so I now have my notes that I need for setting up host-based authentication on SSH and disabling password-based authentication. I didn't know how to do it in the last video because it's kind of hard to figure out, and I was lazy to figure it out, to be quite frank. But I have the steps here, and it's actually quite concise. It's just not that easy to figure it out, though. But once I figured out all the steps, I now have it. So I'm going to showcase that here, since it is actually fairly easy in principle. So essentially what you do is, so this is a computer that I'm going to use to connect to a server. The server I'm going to connect to in this case will be my main computer. So let's actually switch to that real quick. So I'm going to launch my WSL instance on here, which will take a little bit to launch. I'm going to set up the host-based authentication with this right here. I should be able to do it on the spot, if it'll even load. I had to press a key to make it work. It must have fallen asleep behind the scenes. So as far as getting SSH to run at startup, I actually never figured that out yet. So I always just open this up and manually start SSH, and then I'm good to go because I usually have several days of uptime. So it doesn't matter right now. But eventually I'll figure out how to manually set up SSH as startup. So I'm going to see if... Okay, so it looks like SSH is not running. So to start it, I'll just do sudo service SSH start. And now SSH should be running under password-based authentication right now. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to do host-based authentication. So since this is a computer that I would normally be connecting to, this is the server. The computer that you're connecting to is a server. And then the computer you're using to connect to SSH, which is this one in our case, that is a client. So on the client, that's where we start. You want to run the following command. SSH keygen, regardless of which way you're doing this, -t RSA, and then you'll get like this whole picture thing when you run that command. I'm not going to run it because I've already done it, but by the way, you don't have to set a password on that step. That's the first thing you do regardless of which way you do it. And then if you happen to have password-based authentication still, it's actually quite simple how you do this. The next command with password-based authentication is SSH copy ID -I, and the ID by default is stored in home.ssh, then the ID rsa.pub, and then where are you copying that to? In my case, it would be -p 2022, since I'm using port 2022. I'll make this smaller so the overlay doesn't get in our way here. Oh, that's convenient how it's printing everything out. So then this -p is not relevant if you're using the default port 22. If you don't know, you're probably using the default. And then the user at the server. So in my case, it would be Joseph at .1.27, I think. I'm actually, fun fact, I am currently having networking issues with SSH. I don't even know why, but we have a router and a modem. Our router fried because of a storm recently, which means that Ethernet on the router no longer works, but Wi-Fi still works. So as far as hardware goes, we use the modem because it's actually pretty good for our purposes. Why bother getting a new router right now? Wi-Fi still works, and the hardwire on the modem is pretty much just as good as our router, so it really doesn't matter that much to us because we're normies. But I'm on the router right now because of the SSH issues that I've been having recently. I think it's some sort of network thing with the modem on hardwire. So I'm using Wi-Fi instead because that goes to the router and it works on that fine for some reason. Don't know what's going on there. Maybe a firewall change with a recent update. No idea. I'll look into that one of these days, but for now, this is a good workaround for me. So this is a command that you run if you have password-based authentication enabled, which I think I do. And actually, I can't get in right now for some reason. Probably because the username is wrong. I'm going to try my other one. Actually, I might be using the wrong computer in the first place. Wrong IP address. I'm going to verify that real quick. It did appear to have the IP address wrong. So it's actually supposed to be .28. And if you have password-based authentication, this should just make everything work. Okay, so I've decided that I'm going to do the second method instead of the first, since it doesn't really seem to work with my current configuration. But if you have password-based authentication, then what you should have experienced just now was it just asked for the password like normal, and then it would have done pretty much all the steps for you. But using the second method, which assumes that you don't have password-based authentication enabled, this is what you do. You want to copy that id.rsa.pub, which you can find in this folder right here by default, unless you changed it. This file right here. You want to copy that to the computer you're connecting to manually, rather than automatically using that other command. So what I've done is I've copied this file to the computer that I'm connected to. As you can see, it's right here. So what I want to do then, so you don't actually have to do this with that first method with the SSH copy ID. But if you're doing the other method, then what you want to do is append the contents of this file to the known hosts or the authorized keys files. So there should be a file called authorized keys dot, no, it's just authorized keys. And basically you just add the contents of this text file to there. And then you should be good as far as the host authentication goes. That first method that I showed does all this stuff automatically. But this is a manual way, so I'm going to take the contents from this file and add it to that authorized keys file, which doesn't actually exist because I did write it out. But regardless, what I'm going to do is, since I'm in that SSH folder, I'm going to find this file on my desktop and just say cat, since there's only one line in the file, cat. I'm loading the path of this right here, which is that, but you would do your corresponding path with a text file, whether it's on a flash drive or something. I'm going to pipe it to T-A authorized keys. And I'm going to have to regenerate that since you're seeing it right here, but that's basically what you do. So now that should work. And to basically disable password-based authentication, which is what we're going to do next. So those are the two methods. The last step is exactly the same now. The first step and last step are the same, but everything in between, which I showed the two methods of. I mean, basically step one is run that SSH keygen command, and then add the contents of that idrsa.pub to the authorized keys file, whether you use the SSH copy ID command that I previously showed or this manual way, but they ultimately do the same thing. I just did it that manual way, which assumes that password-based authentication is already disabled. And then the last step is the same regardless. So as you break it up into three parts, that's how you do it. I will be making a video someday basically showing how to do this in like 30 seconds to a minute. So there will be a very concise video showing how to do this coming out sometime this year. It's the beginning of the year, so within the next 12 months, I think it'll come out, maybe sooner. I might have it come out sooner, maybe. Yeah. I'll probably do an I reference when it does come out. I'm not 100% sure. So regardless, that second step is done. So this is the last step. So I'm going to actually stop the SSH service. Nah, we can restart it afterwards. So regardless, we're going to, whether you're using Vim or Nano, we're going to edit the SSHD config file, which is located in that path. Make sure the port is correct. In my case, it's 2022 since I'm using WSL, and that's separate from Windows itself. But to disable password-based authentication, you want to go to the challenge response. Oops, spelled that wrong. You want to go to challenge response authentication, change that to no if it's not already there. Then password authentication, change that to no. And then change use PAM to no as well. And permit root login. I was just there. Yeah, permit root login, uncomment that, and change that to no. Those are the things you need to change in this file. Once you do that, then you want to restart the SSH service like this, or else you use systemctl, but in WSL, this is how I do it. So just like that, we should have proper host-based authentication now. It's actually quite simple in principle. You're basically running the SSH keygen, copying the idrsa.pub contents to the authorized keys file on the actual server using one of two methods. Then you're changing a couple values in the SSHD config. That's all there is to it, honestly. I just showed it all right here. So now let's see if we can connect the Raspberry Pi. We should be able to if I'm not running into the networking issues I previously was. So now I should be able to do SSH with port 22 over to, don't forget the username, I forgot that before. I think it's Joseph at that IP address. Having some networking problems. I think I might have to disable Ethernet since I'm connected to Wi-Fi and I have Ethernet at the same time. I think there's a conflict between the two networks at the same time. So I think I just disabled Ethernet, not 100% sure. Let's find out. Yep. The Wi-Fi signal isn't very good because I put the antenna inside my computer case now because I only use it with the Intel NUC these days, except for right now. Let's try that again. Since they're on the same network, it should work in theory. Let's come back to here and verify the IP address and maybe restart the service one more time now that networking has changed. The IP address of interest is .28. Yeah, we got that right. The username is Joseph. I don't know why that's actually stuck. It's a networking thing. It actually has nothing to do with what we were just doing. You're probably not going to have the networking issues that I'm currently having. But what we just did should have worked. Once I get the network issues resolved in the back end, then it should work fine. I'll probably let you know in the future maybe, but I assume that what I just showed is the correct steps and all that. Okay, so I will be right back. I gotta have some dinner, then we'll do a couple more things. I'll just kind of overview what we're gonna do for mental notes and stuff. Come on. Oh, I disabled the network so my barrier's all screwed up. Alright, I'm gonna unpause and work this all out real quick. Or pause it, I mean. There's one more thing I forgot to show before I wrap up with Mycroft. So let's just get to that. So since I showed how to do host-based authentication with SSH, how do you do it with Ansible? So if you remember, Ansible was how I was dealing with the password-based authentication. And also I forgot to mention I no longer use that password stuff because of host-based authentication. I assume you probably would have been able to infer that. But yeah, I no longer retrieve a password from a file. It's all host-based authentication now, so it's completely unnecessary. So of course, with those steps that I previously showed you, where it failed, I'll prove to you that it works on a different system. So the one that I normally connect to, that refused because I just had the IP address wrong. See? That's with host-based authentication. No password required. By the way, you don't have to set a password on that step. I forgot to mention that before. if you just don't set a password. That's still more secure than just doing password-based authentication, because you have to put the public key on the you have to take the public key of the system you're using to connect, I think, onto the server itself. Meaning you have to get into the server and you need that to access it, so that's actually more secure than using a password. You can do a password for this, but it's really not that necessary. It's still way more secure than doing password-based authentication, because again, you need the public key generated from a private key. So yeah, the public and private key have to match together, so it's harder to achieve that than it is to steal a password, just so you know. That's why this is more secure. So you don't really need a password. I don't, because of host-based authentication. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And Ansible actually slows things down significantly, which is another reason I don't use that. So I want to show how I use host-based authentication with Ansible now. So it's actually pretty straightforward once you have normal SSH set up. So rather than configuring SSH completely with Ansible, you could use the normal SSH protocol to basically set up host-based authentication. You still have to make some changes to the settings. So the first thing is in the ansible.cfg. I won't run it as sudo because I already did this. So in etc ansible.cfg, which I talked about in the previous video, what you want to do is, at least what I'm doing, is adding these variables here. So strict host key check equals no. Host user known host file equals dev null. And forward agent equals yes. That's what I have configured in the ansible.cfg file. And then in the normal Ansible file, in the hosts file, I mean, this is what I have. So I specify the IP address of a group like I normally do, or multiple IP addresses. Then I specify the port and user, but I don't need to specify a password because of the key host-based authentication. So this is all you have to do. And yes, it does work. So I could do Ansible Nookie, which is a group -a. Then I could do like echo hi there or something. And assuming that it came back just fine using the host-based authentication. So the reason I don't use Ansible for this is for Mycroft is because it just slows things down. It's a lot slower than using SSH directly. So unless I'm doing multiple computers together, I'm going to do it regularly and not with Ansible. With Ansible, if I'm doing 2 or more systems, then I'll use Ansible for that. Or else I'll just use multiple commands for each system. But Ansible is quite useful for this. One of the technologies I'm going to try learning this year is Ansible Playbook, so I might be able to utilize it even further in the future. So yeah, that's how you do host-based authentication with Ansible. It's quite simple, isn't it? Once you get the normal host-based authentication set up. Now, if the IP address changes, you will probably have to change something. I can't remember. There's some stuff you might have to change with the host-based authentication if the IP address changes. It depends on whether the authorized keys file has an IP address or host name. If it has an IP address, you just need to change the IP address to reflect the new IP address in the authorized hosts file or authorized keys. This is not facing the internet, so it honestly doesn't matter that you're seeing this right now. But because I could change this at any time. And that's what I'm probably gonna do, so don't think I'm keeping this forever either, even though it doesn't matter. So like how I have a Zinzi23 at the host name. If this was at an IP address rather than a host name, I would need to change it to reflect the new IP address if it changes. That's where the host name is actually quite useful. You don't have to change that. So this is for devices connected to the Raspberry Pi, just so you know. But yeah. So that's what has to change if the IP address changes. And this is how I do host-based authentication on Ansible, and why I hardly even use Ansible at this point. So there you go. So I still have to specify a port in the username for a given group. So that's pretty useful.